Okay, this is, well, it says chapter 23, but it's really chapter 10 in macroeconomics this time. Chapter 23 refers to the hardcover version of this of this book, but this, I believe, is really chapter 10, and we start the macroeconomics version now, and we're doing measuring a nation's income, which is really going to be the study of something known as GDP. Okay, we continue. In this chapter, we look for answers to the following questions. What is gross domestic product? How is GDP related to a nation's total income and spending? What are the components of GDP? How is GDP corrected for inflation? And does GDP measure society's well-being? Let's step back a bit and look at micro versus macro and expenditure and income. Okay, why is GDP important? It tells us, of course, whether a society or an economy is growing or in a recession. And a recession is 6 months of GDP or flat for us to be in a recession. Now, other major macroeconomic indicators are inflation and unemployment. Let's look at the difference between macro and micro and review that. Microeconomics, the study of how individual households and firms make decisions, interact with one another in markets. So it's the study of individuals. Macroeconomics, the study of the economy as a whole. We begin our study of macroeconomics with the country's total expenditure and income. And here's income expenditure. GDP measures the total income of everyone in the economy. It also measures total expenditure on the economy's output of GNS. GNS means goods and services. Now, for an economy as a whole, income equals expenditure because every dollar of expenditure by a buyer means a dollar of income for the seller. And so one can measure GDP in one of two ways, looking at the economy's total income or the economy's total expenditure. And let's review the visualization of expenditure and income. We look at firms and households. This comes from chapter 2. As they interact in markets, households supply factors of production to the firms. Firms pay rent. That becomes income. Households spend money. And then they receive goods and services. So you can look at GDP in one of two ways, vis-a-vis the spending or vis-a-vis the income. So one of two ways of looking at it. Generally, we look at the expenditure approach, the amount of total spending on GDP. There are some slight differences between the two, but they're not important right now at the principles level. Okay, what this diagram omits, it omits the government, the financial system, and the foreign sector. We'll look at the we'll look at the financial system and the foreign sector in a little bit in next chapters. But now let's look at the definition of GDP. GDP, market value of all final goods and services. Market value, market prices, so goods. GDP measures all goods using the same units rather than adding apples and oranges. So we look at the production, but we look at the market value of that production. Things that don't have a market value are excluded, e.g. housework you do for yourself and or volunteer work. Final goods are at the retail level. Intermediate goods, we do not look at the ingredients in the final good, we look only at the final good itself. goods, we look at tangible goods and intangible services. We look at currently produced goods, not goods in the past. So GDP is looked at per quarter and or per year within a country's within the borders of a country. And finally, within a given period of time, use a year or quarter every 3 months.